Welcome back to Healing Octopus Radio. I'm David Barbarisi. In this episode, I'm sharing a replay from a terrain Q&A call I gave in December of 2025. I answered some pre-submitted questions, including why I use the term terrain paradigm instead of theory or model and what that means to me. I talked about hygiene and hand washing. Does it still matter if germ theory is unproven? I talked about disengaging from the mainstream medical systems when emergency care makes sense, and the challenges of coming off of certain pharmaceuticals, why that needs to be individualized. I also talked about why the terrain thinkers in our space disagree so much on diet and substances and frameworks and other ideas, and some ways that I have developed my own principles for discernment so that I don't have to chase consensus amongst the terrain thinkers, plus a few other topics. If you would like to join on the terrain Q&A calls or you have a question, please DM me on Instagram at Healing Octopus or any of the other social media, and I'll add you to my email list, and maybe I'll answer your questions in a future call. So planning on having those monthly. This is the very first one from last December. I hope you enjoy. Hey, everyone on live call and replays and all that. Thanks for coming to the terrain Q&A call. This is my first one. I'm David, if you haven't met me before. How did you find me would be one question. But yeah, so I'm going to kind of go through a few different questions I got for this call. I'm going to make this a regular thing. This is for people who are kind of first coming into to the terrain paradigm and maybe have gone down a few of the rabbit holes, but I don't want you to have to go down all the rabbit holes or spend the years that I spent on this. And so I'm going to go through a few concepts, a few questions, and hopefully this will give you some things to think about, and then you can send me more questions and stuff. And then we can do a little live thing at the end too. So first thing I wanted to talk about, paradigm versus model versus theory. So when I first got into the terrain stuff, 5 years ago, I guess, I mainly started out in the no virus situation. So this is listening to different influencers, people have gone down this route. And I've started, as I've progressed, I've gotten more into the germ theory situation. And so like, it's kind of become the like competing ideas of germ theory versus terrain theory of whether germs cause illness. And since then, within the past year or so, since learning from the Bigelson brothers and a few others, I've started to call it the terrain paradigm. And this to me reflects that it's more of a full philosophy and way of thinking, and not just this germ versus terrain kind of thing. So because I feel like germ versus terrain still fits within the existing kind of small paradigm of like there's allopathy and there's holistic health or holistic medicine or whatever, and they all still kind of sort of have those same framings of, you know, there's still stuff to fight, or there's still mistakes, or there's still random things going on. And then I see terrain paradigm as being like a third thing, the third path of this is totally different. We really need to like step back and rethink everything, because it's not just that one little piece. So I think the terrain theory versus germ theory kind of keeps it locked into that piece, whereas I'm saying we're going back on the whole philosophy. Like there's no random stuff. There's no war with microbes or anything. Nature isn't out to get us. Even the parasites are helpful, and I can get into the parasite conversation a little later. But yeah, that it's all for us, and most or all of it is our responsibility, and we have some control over it or some way to manage all of that. So that's why I use the word paradigm, and that's why I want to make it bigger than terrain theory. And then to speak to the word model is kind of interesting in that it would mean that we already need to know the thing first or have the original thing. So kind of like if you're making, I don't know, a model airplane, like you already know what the airplane is, and then you're making a smaller like toy version of it. So that's kind of what models are. They're sort of representing the bigger thing, but then we also kind of have to have an idea of the bigger thing. So that gets into a whole philosophical conversation that I'm going to avoid by just calling this paradigm. So I see it as a philosophy or a framework. We're not at war with anything. We're all in symbiotic relationship. The symptoms are either the resolutions or the messages or both. Like they're all for our benefit. So that solves the paradigm problem, I hope. The next question I got was around hand washing. And so this comes up sometimes of if germs don't cause disease, then do we still need to be clean and hygienic? And the answer is yes. And so this kind of comes up from Semmelweis, who was the doctor who figured out if you wash your hands between working in the morgue and delivering babies, then you get better results delivering babies and less people die. And that doesn't prove germ theory. That just proves that you shouldn't, play with dead stuff and then go deliver babies. So then we can get into the questions of like, okay, what exactly is the thing from the morgue that's like causing people to get sick in the maternity ward? And okay, maybe playing with dead tissue, or not playing, but handling dead tissue. Maybe it's handling toxic chemicals, embalming fluid, that kind of stuff. It could be any number of other things. And the point is just like, it doesn't prove that germs or microbes were the cause of the thing. So, yeah, being hygienic is still important just because you don't want gross stuff. And we can define gross is kind of difficult, but we don't want extra like stuff getting inside of us. I've tried to use the example of like, you still don't want like poop on you. Like it's out of your body. It wants to be, your body wanted it out. You don't put it back in. And then someone pointed out the example of like when babies are born, they're getting like fecal microbes or something to help their microbiome. So I don't know, maybe there's an exception there. But the point being that like the substance itself like isn't supposed to be in the body, and there's a whole reason why it exited. And that again doesn't prove that it's the microbes, or like there's plenty of other components involved in that thing. So yeah, like don't put outside stuff in like open wounds or any other things. Like your inside stuff's supposed to be inside and the outside stuff's supposed to be outside. So that doesn't prove anything on a microscopic level. That's just like direct experience. And this is one thing that like I'm trying to point us all to, is like going back to direct experience. So that's the hand washing one. Yeah, and then the detaching ourselves from the medical system. And so this is kind of the question of, we're already plugged into mainstream healthcare. We're already plugged into allopathy with interventions and pills and all kinds of things. Then like, how do we remove ourselves from those systems if they're not benefiting us? And there's a nuanced part where like there are very tiny instances where we need those things. Emergency care always comes up as the number one thing. And there's a question of which things are emergencies and which aren't. And I think a lot fewer things are emergencies than what we've been told. And I also think that we wouldn't have as many emergencies if we were like living more naturally anyway. So like, yeah, physical injuries and stuff. I always say if my arm falls off, then, kind of gotta do something a little more drastic there. And I think when we are in drastic situations, like that changes the balance of like when to do, let's say, natural approaches versus allopathy. So for people already engaged in there, I mean, the mindset is like the biggest piece. So like if they don't want it, then they don't want it. And I don't have good answers for that other than we plant seeds and we live as examples of the way we're living. So hopefully we just live awesome lives and other people see what we're doing and see how joyful and thriving we are, and then start to ask questions. And I just don't think there's any easier way to do that for the mindset part. So that's mindset. If people are interested, if they're like, oh, this isn't working for me, I don't like being on all these prescriptions and doing all these surgeries and all that stuff, I think it has to be slow and gentle. And I think it depends. I mean, it's very individual. Um, like some pharmaceuticals are like not, I would say, addictive, or not, like the body doesn't get used to them. And so like those are easier to kind of wean off of or whatever. But then we talk about like antidepressants and other psych drugs and stuff. And like those are not easy to get off of. In my own journey, I was very fortunate that I did get off the antidepressant. It took about a year, and I had help, and I was slowly, like, I was like cutting pills and stuff, um, lowering the dosage and everything. And then, yeah, and then it's gonna throw me off with the waiting room thing. All in progress. So the antidepressant, so getting off of that, I was also doing a lot of other changes, so like the food and getting outside and doing the like getting back to nature kind of thing. So I feel like that's important too, of saying like do the other things before trying to like completely get rid of allopathy. Like I think get the basics down, and to me that makes sense to me, of like that would be helpful to like build up a baseline, because like I started to feel better first, and so me feeling better was, I think, made getting off the antidepressant a little easier. um and then like there's like much harder stuff like insulin, and like the more I'm going to say more serious, as if depression isn't serious. It's kind of serious too. um but yeah, like I think the very specific cases of the like, okay, do get the basics down first, um, and then see where things go from there. And then like, yeah, there are plenty, like we all need support. Like there's plenty of holistic practitioners um on, who can help with those kinds of things. So um, but yeah, I mean it has to be the person. Like they have to be ready for it. And that pains me, because yeah, I just want to change everybody. But that's not how it works, and that's kind of how we get used. That's, I mean, getting used to just accepting that that's how it is. um Especially all the holiday times where we get to see everyone. Maybe the family members aren't doing the same thing as us, and they you know and yeah, just wanting to be okay with where everyone else is, and that's all we can do. But yeah, it's certainly hard these times with seeing the family members and different people who are going through difficult times and just not interested in doing anything in a holistic or natural way. Yeah, and then the next part of that around oh yeah, the turning to natural approaches when like you have lots of other stuff going on. Yeah, I think getting a practitioner who knows how to do that kind of stuff. Like there are people who've gotten off of psych drugs, and they like know the experience. I can definitely point people in some different directions there, but yeah, I couldn't speak to that anymore with any like experience other than my own. um and then the other part of that about listening to the terrain experts, or I call them the influencers, is kind of a snarky thing to say. As I'm doing this social media stuff and becoming an influencer myself. So I've liked the phrase thought leader. So listening to all the different terrain people in our space, and they have lots of conflicting ideas and things, and they don't agree on stuff. And diet is the thing that comes up the biggest. And then German new medicine has been another point of contention. And different substances, DMSO and methylene blue and all that kind of stuff. And so we listen to different influencers in our community, and they all have different opinions on different things. And my conclusion around that is we're not going to come to a consensus. Everybody's coming from different backgrounds. Everybody's looking at different things that they're using as evidence. And everyone has different principles. So one of my big things that one of my dreams for people is that you have your own set of principles and strategies for discernment. And so there's a little bit of this element of I am a truth seeker, or I do seek truth. I don't know that I want to use that label anymore, but I do seek truth, but I also believe that I can't know truth from where I am right now. And so I'm not going to waste my time and energy trying to discern or trying to research every little piece of this substance and that substance and this one or this framework or whatever. And I mean, I've gone through that with a number of different topics, and I'm just tired. It gets exhausting. So now I'm at a point where I'm trying to form my frameworks and my principles of okay, I tend to value natural substances more than synthetic ones. So in general, I probably won't go and look at a lot of synthetic solutions just because it doesn't fit within my worldview. And then I like the ancestral worldview. So for the diet, I love the Weston A. Price Foundation. It makes sense to me. I'm okay, this is what traditional people ate. This is how they prepared the food. This is how they sourced it. They had multiple generations of happy, healthy people, and they had all their teeth and all of that. That makes sense to me. That feels good to me. I don't know if it's true for everyone forever, but those are the principles I'm going to go by. And so when I don't know, the fruitarians show up and they talk about the physiology or whatever, I don't value those lenses as much as what I have already. So that means I might not end up at truth, and I might have, I might miss things, but also I just don't have to spend so much time on it. So that's kind of where I'm evaluating different things. And I've not published this, but I'm doing a whole presentation on discernment in the health space so that we can kind of look at how to evaluate these claims, how to look at these things. If you're someone who likes the studies and likes, going down the rabbit holes and yeah, we can go do the studies. We can see what it says about this or that. If you like the experiential piece more, then yeah, go listen to more anecdotes, take in, what people are saying and evaluate there. And another thing that's been really big for me is the individuality of us all. Because for everything that everyone says something has worked for them, I have also found people who've said, oh, that was terrible. That didn't do anything for me, whatever. And I think it's everything. So this is another nudge for all of us and myself to go back to our own experience and to our own instinct. I don't know. I don't love the word intuition all the time, but to go back to our own kind of thinking as well. So I try not to get caught up in all that, the way people frame things. I also try to look at what's useful or not, and things like, what's like easy or what's cheap or like what seems fun, what's closer to nature. It's free to go outside and put your feet on the ground and get in the sun. Like, okay, that's easy. I'll go do that. Um, as opposed to like buy a $10,000 device that, you know, people say cures everything or whatever. So that's a little bit of how I discern things or how I'm like looking at the world. And what I feel is that the terrain paradigm or my current understanding of it helps simplify a lot of those things. Also adds some complexity in other areas, especially the unlearning, even from the holistic world. But I find it more useful than a lot of other things. So, cool. I'm good on time. One last thing I wanted to say was like talking about the external terrain, and this was a reminder to me that I got yesterday of the terrain even means our home and our neighborhood and my room and all of that. And so even that terrain affects us, and it's ours. We made it. I made a mess. I have to clean up, all that kind of stuff. And that affects the emotions and that affects the health and that affects everything. And so could say it from, and that's within my control. My own home, how I set things up, how I clean up things, how I add paintings and nice things that bring me joy within my home, what my neighborhood is like, what the city is like. And there's a little bit of both. There's my inner world reflects the outer world, and also the outer world has an effect on my inner world. So I just wanted to add that piece. And yeah, that's as far as I wanted to go here. Oh, and I was supposed to promote things. Yeah, so I'm going to do more of these terrain calls, I think monthly. Get more people like who are asking questions about like the basics and the common questions and that kind of stuff. I'm working on posting more video stuff on social media, doing more Substack stuff, and I am launching a podcast. Yeah, we're gonna soft launch it here. Healing Octopus Radio is the current title, although I might be changing it. But I posted one episode and I went through my origin story and the things that I like to talk about. So it is there. It exists. It's a little scary. It's not super refined, but that has happened. That is happening. So yeah, working on different projects like that and hoping to do more, or I am doing more of educational stuff, speaking, telling people how I think. And yeah, so everybody can follow all of that. HealingOctopus.com or Healing Octopus on Instagram and the other social media things. My email list and probably other things that I've signed up for. Thanks for listening to the episode. If you would like to join me on a future terrain call, please DM me on Instagram at Healing Octopus or on the other social networks, and I'll get you connected there. And if you have terrain questions, please send them my way as well. I will continue to upload the talk portion of these calls to the podcast. So subscribe in your favorite podcast thing and you'll get those updates. Please share this with others and leave reviews if you feel inclined. And until then, I will see you next time. Take care.